The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It's currently Thursday afternoon, roughly 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time here on January 9th. I'm Rosso, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into four matches on the card. We do have the semifinal matchups that are going to be taking place in Adelaide and in Auckland. So we're going to preview all four of those matches in a second. For that, though, do want to quickly recap what happened the last episode, both for the lock and dog picks, as well as the actual match recaps of what happened in the quarterfinals. Starting off with the lock and dog picks, another sweep, back-to-back sweeps for the show. For the lock, definitely not easy. It was the ride of a lifetime. Had Bergs minus 1.5 games against Baena at minus 130. Not easy when you have a minus 1.5 game spread and you lose the first set 6-1. In fact, you'd argue that most of the time you were absolutely screwed. However, Bergs came back and he ended up winning and covering as he ended up winning the second set in convincing fashion. Needed it, won it 6-2, then eventually did win the third set 6-3. So either way, came back from losing the first set 6-1 to actually not only win, but cover for us. Massive run by him, especially at the end. He could have served it out potentially two times where we needed two holds in a row to actually win. Got broken. Then luckily for us, he got the break right back and then held to win. So either way, point is nice win for the lock. For the dog, though, ended up picking up a nice and easy winner as we ended up having Basaveretti and Mickelson match over 2.5 sets at plus 130. Never in doubt, alternated 6-2 sets in the first two, and then Basaveretti got the job done as he eventually did win in 3. So either way, point is we had one very stressful but fun in hindsight because we won, lock win, and then we also had the very never in doubt a dog win with the over 2.5 sets there. So once again, back-to-back sweeps, overall good form on the podcast. We'll hopefully keep it rolling here for the semifinal matchups in Adelaide and in Auckland. Now, before we get into the actual preview of the matchups we're going to talk about in this episode, do want to remind you once again that you can show support for the show by subscribing on YouTube. And a reminder, you can also leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple. Seeing these subscribers go up a little bit recently, hopefully we do keep that rolling. A reminder, we do have a couple of episodes coming up this weekend, not just for the finals in Adelaide and Auckland. It's Aussie Open time. The draws officially were released last night, both for men's and women's. So once again, we are going to break down both the men's and women's outrights over the weekend. So keep that in mind. So once again, a lot of episodes coming up over the next few days. So hopefully you do enjoy, and hopefully you stick around for all those shows. Plus, a reminder, check out the merch store on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great overall merchandise from the show. We have shirts, we have sweatshirts, we have mugs, a lot of great content, a lot of affordable content. Once again, a lot of it's comfortable. For example, have the Tennis Gambling Podcast shirt. Highly recommend. Very comfortable. I wear it all the time. Point is, though, if you do want to get some merch to support the show, you can do so. Not just for this show, but for the other shows at the network, whether it involves the NBA show, the MLB show, for example, college experience as well. A lot of options for you there. Plus, a reminder for the actual SGPN overall, I'd say, main talking point for the network, you have the NFL playoffs, which are going to be starting over the weekend. And a reminder, you can also show your support by tuning into the Sports Game Podcast for all of your NFL picks and prop needs. So check that out as well. Now, for the actual recap of the matches that we ended up seeing in the quarters, starting off with Auckland, you had a couple of marathons. In fact, 3 of the 4 matchups ended up going to a deciding set. So starting off with the, once again, lock and dog pick winners that we ended up having, Bergs came back, losing the first set. He rallied and won in 3. So Basaveretti, who once again ended up losing the first set, and then he came back and he also won in 3. So nice comeback there by Basaveretti. Either way, though, point is a couple of fun matchups to start the card. Then moving on to the next matchup, ended up seeing Monfils dominate against Diaz-Acosta. Not a total shock there. We had Monfils to win the tournament, but the point is Diaz-Acosta was a bit of a shocker to actually make it that far. But luckily for us, that was definitely good for Monfils' draw as he dominated and he won in straight sets. Then for the last match, ended up having the match of the day probably, which was Mensik against Borges. Borges dropped the first set again and then came back and won as he did win the final set in a tiebreak. So Borges trying to copy the overall path that Mueller had last week, which was dropping the first set in every match and trying to win the tournament. Because so far, that's what's happened. He's dropped the first set and he's still in the semis. We'll see if Borges can keep rolling here on the, once again, upcoming schedule for the semis. Besides that, though, moving on to Adelaide. Adelaide was significantly more straightforward. In fact, all the matches kind of sucked. Getting into the actual matches here, you saw Paul destroy Hijikata. Hijikata had a good run there beating Nakashima, but Paul got the job done comfortably as he won in straight sets. Good for us. We do have his outright for the event. As for the other matches, the one really competitive one here was Felix against Giron. Ended up going to a tiebreak in the first set, but Felix did eventually win in straight sets. Good showing by him. For the other matchup, ended up seeing Kekmanovic beat Bonzi in straight sets. Kekmanovic has been really good. It's nice to see him play well. The issue is, we know the talent's there. The issue is mentally, he seems to self-destruct at times. We saw that in the last tournament where he ended up going up a set against Mueller, then he lost in 3. I guess in hindsight, not totally his fault because Mueller won the tournament doing the same exact thing every time. So I guess the point is Kekmanovic does seem to start 2025 in good form. We'll see if it carries over into the Aussie Open. Point is, though, he is still alive and he's been looking sharp here in Adelaide as he approaches the semis. And as for the last matchup, we didn't have one, as Kokkinakis won a marathon against Echeverry and then decided, you know what? I got the Australian Open to worry about, and I'm injured all the time. So you know what? I'm good. I'm not going to bother showing up today. I'll let Korda, fresh off of the elbow surgery, get a bye into the semis, as Korda did win via walkover. So once again, not really that much drama, if any drama, associated with Adelaide. The polar opposite of what we ended up seeing in Auckland, as you saw once again 3 of the 4 matches end in a deciding set. Now, besides that, trying to think of any other news worth talking about, you had a couple of, I'd say, interesting potential matchups that are going to be taking place in the first round of the Australian Open because the draw was released. However, I think I'm going to briefly touch upon the actual qualifying for the Australian Open, just as a brief discussion point. So first of all, Fonseca, still really, really, really good at tennis. Fun matchup, though, in the first round against Rublev, which could be an upset that a lot of people have, I'd say, in their brackets, if they end up making brackets. But the point is, you ended up seeing a pretty fun first-round matchup, at least what should be one, between Rublev and Fonseca, which should be a good time. Basaveretti, who's been good so far this season, taking on Djokovic in the first round, which does not sound fun for him, but he might maybe win a set. We'll see what happens. But not a really easy draw for Joker. I'll get more into depth with the actual takeaways from the draw when we get into the men's episode for the outrights and futures. We'll get into some quarter picks. You know the drill. Point is, though, I did want to at least touch upon the draw because I thought it was pretty interesting. But either way, we'll save most of the takeaways or most of the dives for the episode at hand when the time comes, when we go over the final of Adelaide and Auckland first. Trying to think if there's any other news that's worth talking about. Not really. You ended up seeing, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, the main takeaway that I'll mention is the fact that you're looking at a potential Djokovic and Alcaraz quarter clash, which is definitely surprising, and you could argue fortunate or unfortunate, because one, you want to see them play against each other, but you kind of want the stakes to be a bit higher when they face off against each other. Point is, though, with Joker and Alcaraz being in the same quarter, ouch. That's definitely not exactly a good draw for either guy. I'm sure Sinner's thrilled, we'll put it that way. Point is, though, we'll get into the draw a bit more in detail over the next few days, but overall wanted to mention that Aussie Open qualifying is officially over, and there are some interesting and intriguing matchups taking place in the first round. For example, I think Sinner's taking on Jari in the first round. Sinner's going to win. I'm not going to try to give you an upset pick, but it is a pretty interesting first round matchup where Jari's still not a bad player. I believe he was top 20 at some point last year or 2 years ago. So once again, a couple of interesting matchups potentially taking place in the first round. But either way, point is time to move on into the 4 matchups that we're going to talk about for this episode. For that, though, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by DraftKings, because playoffs, talk about the playoffs, the NFL playoffs are here. You bet we are talking about it. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. A reminder that scoring touchdowns is pretty important when it comes to actually winning playoff games, and DraftKings lets you bet on touchdown scores. You can bet on, once again, really a bunch of different options for first touchdown. You can bet on multiple touchdowns per game. You can bet on anytime touchdown. A lot of options. A reminder, though, when you are ready to place your first bet, try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook, either the app or even a website if you want to use it on your computer. Make your picks, and a reminder, new customers can get a $5 bet to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. A reminder, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code SGP. That's code SGP for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished quickly recapping what happened in the quarters. Time to move on into the semifinal matchups here in Adelaide and in Auckland. So for the actual schedule, we are going to go through Auckland first. So just keep that in mind. Auckland is technically taking place on Thursday, actually, at around 7 p.m. Eastern. And then you have both matchups in Adelaide taking place post-midnight. So we're going to get into Auckland first. Now, for the actual matchups in order, first matchup should be a good one. You have Monfils against Basaveretti. A reminder, we do have Monfils to win the event, so that's our only outright left here, but definitely a good price. Hopefully gets the job done as he's favored in this one. Minus 135. You have Basaveretti at plus 115. For the game spread, you have minus 1.5 for Monfils. You have plus 1.5 for Basaveretti. For the games total, you have 23. You can probably find 22.5, though, at a slightly more juiced price. And for the actual over-under for sets, you have the over 2.5 sets at plus 130. Monfils in straight sets is plus 190. Basaveretti to win in straight sets is plus 250. Been a deja vu, actually. They faced off about a week and a half ago or so, as they faced off on December 31st. Face-off in Brisbane was a 3-setter, and Monfils did win in 3, as he won the final set 6-1 after alternating 6-4s. Now, Basaveretti has been good so far in the event. Definitely making a name for himself quickly, as he had a great challenger run to end of last year, then made the next-gen finals kind of out of nowhere, and then ended up once again making it into the semis here in Auckland. Been good, though. I ended up beating Mickelson in 3, beat Tabilo, defending champion, in 3, but beat Komensanya in straight sets. Also went through qualifying, beat Altmaier, and beat Dzanschulp in 3 sets. So overall, he's been good. So once again, we'll see how the matchup plays out. Now, Monfils has had a very interesting path because he probably should have lost to Martinez. He was getting his ass kicked in the first round. Then he came back and he won in 3. Since then, he's been rolling, though. He's won 6 straight sets. Won the final 2 against Martinez, ended up beating Struff in straight sets, and beat Diaz Acosta, a pretty favorable draw, I'll admit, in the quarters there in straight sets, only dropping 4 games in the process. So, point is, Monfils seems to be in good form. And I mentioned before that rallying is definitely the key to success here in Auckland over the years, as most big servers tend to not do that well in this event. And both guys, I'll admit, are not great at serving. Kind of a fun potential baseline rally matchup between two guys that are not afraid of standing back there and trying to outlast opposition. But you're looking at the overall matchup, and I do think it makes sense Monfils favored. Do I think he should be minus 135? Maybe that's a bit steep. I understand he just won the last meeting, but it was close to go to 3 sets. I think Basaveretti can keep it interesting. It's kind of interesting, though, because Monfils has won each of the last 2 matchups in straight sets, where Basaveretti's been the opposite. He's been kind of a marathon guy, winning each of the last 2 in a competitive 3 sets. So for this matchup, I think I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets here. I think it'll be close between them. I think you're looking at a decent amount of breaks of serve, and I think it might balance out per set. I do think Monfils, once again, should be favored, and I'd probably pick him to win, because he did win the first meeting, and I do think that for the courts here in Auckland, I think that Monfils' skill set translates slightly better. I think Monfils is a slightly better server, maybe not by a lot, but I think that you can make the argument he has a little bit more variety with the serve, because he's not afraid of kicking it out wide, occasionally volleying behind it. Basaveretti's not really there yet. I think his serve's fine for a young player, but I think that Monfils might get a couple more free points off the serve, and that might be all you need in a matchup that should be very close. I don't see much value, though. I'm minus 135. I think that, once again, you're looking at what should be a close matchup. I prefer the over if I had to pick a total or a side in this one. So I'll go with the over 2.5 sets of plus 130. Give me a rinse and repeat of what we saw about a week and a half ago. A close matchup that Monfils does eke out, hopefully for us, as we do have him to win the event once again at around 16-1. So hopefully Monfils gets the job done in this matchup. I like Basaveretti, though. Think he's a good player, but once again, I am going to be biased towards our outrights, at least for rooting interest. So we'll see if Monfils can come through. But I do think it'll be fun. I think it'll be drama-filled. And I do think it's going to go more the way of Basaviredis' recent matches, where he ended up getting a marathon. And I do think, unlike the previous 2 rounds, he will eventually be on the wrong side. Moving on to the next matchup that we are going to talk about. Going to look at a matchup between Borges and Bergs. Probably not the matchup you expected to see in the semis here. Now, for this matchup, Borges slight favorite, -125. Bergs around +105. For the game spread, you have -1 for Burgess. You have +1 for Bergs. For the actual total games here, you have 22.5. The overs -115. The unders -105. For the set spread, you have -1.5 sets for Borges at +190. You have -1.5 sets for Bergs at +240. For the over 2.5 sets, you have +135. Faced off one time in their careers. It was very dated, though. Faced off in 2020 in a futures event, and Borges did win 6-4, 7-6. Means nothing. I'm going to toss it out. Now, Borges has had a pretty interesting run as he went through qualifying, had a couple of marathon qualifying matches, beating Busta and beating Comasanya. Then he ended up having 2 easy matchups against pretty, I'd say, underwhelming players in Beecroft and Nardi. He won those in straight sets. Then he got killed in the first set against Baena, and then came back and won in 3. As for Borges, mentioned it before, he has been trying to copy Mueller as he's dropped the first set in every round. He's won every match. So we'll see how it goes. Point is, though, he's a solid player. He's currently in the top 40. We saw him win a title last year, and it seems like he's starting to kind of figure out his game on the ATP Tour. Not saying he's going to be a threat to win any, to make a series run in a Grand Slam anytime soon. But for these 250s, he's pretty good, and it does seem like he is starting to kind of find himself again after having an underwhelming end to 2024, and I'd say a questionable beginning as he lost in the second round in Hong Kong in straight sets to Munar. Now, for the actual matchup here, I do think it makes sense that Borges is favored, especially when you factor in the competition they faced off. I know Busta is a solid player. That was in qualifying, and so is Comasanya. I don't think that Bergs has really beaten many guys worth a damn in this event. Beat Beecroft, beat Nardi, and beat Baena. I don't think any of those guys are really good on hard court. I know Nardi did beat Joker last year, but I don't think he's very good. I've mentioned that many times on the show. For Borges, though, he's beaten some questionable competition too. Navone has improved on hard court, but Mensic's good on hard court. That's a good win. It's a solid win there in the quarters. Once again, dropped the first set, came back and won in the final set breaker. I think that Borges is the better player. I think that the price sounds about right. I'd probably go Borges to get the job done here. I think at a pretty decent price of -125. However, do want to point out a niche prop that could be interesting here, which is actually the first set money line. I don't mind Bergs to get the job done here in the first set. Even dating back to last year, Borges has dropped the first set in a pretty, once again, it's a pretty common theme. He dropped the first set in 6 straight matches. So if you want to go by, I'd say, trends, fading Borges in the first set has its merits. He dropped the first set in all 5 matches of 2020. All 4 matches of 2025. The first round match in Hong Kong against Boo, that was the last day of 2024, dropped that too. So once again, the first 5 matches of this season, he's dropped the first set. And Bergs has not been amazing in the first set. He has been better than Borges. If you want to go for a very, very fun long shot, you can go for the Borges or Mueller special, which is Borges dropping the first set and winning the match. That's a +550 on DraftKings. Don't mind the odds there. But give me Borges to win. I think he's the better player. Bergs, I think, is fine. The issue is he hasn't really played anybody. And I do think that beating Mensik on hard court's impressive. That's good enough for me. Give me Borges to get the job done here in this matchup at a pretty affordable price. Moving on to the matchups here in Adelaide. So for this one, fun match to start. You have Paul taking on Felix. Paul's a favorite in this one, as Paul is around -135. For Felix, you have +115. For the game spread here, you have -1.5 for Paul. You have +1.5 for Felix, both -110 for the juice. For the actual over-under in games, you have 23. You can probably find 22.5, though, if you search hard enough. For the actual set spread here, you have Paul to win in straight sets at around +180. You have Felix to win in straight sets at +275. The over 2.5 sets here is around +120. So for the actual matchup here, faced off one time in the past, Felix did win. It was dated, though, Indian Wells a couple years ago in 2023, and Felix did win the match in a third set tiebreak. So very competitive first matchup in their head-to-head, but that was dated. Paul now is a top 12 guy in the world. based on ranking, he might end up being a top 10 guy, actually. Felix, though, is ranked 29th. We'll see how he does in the rankings moving forward. Point is, though, Paul has not really played much tennis this year, as he did lose in Paris in October. Didn't play since. Then he ended up beating Guinard in 3, and then he beat Chikata 6-3, 6-4. As for Felix, he looked very underwhelming in the first set against Kaza, as he dropped the first set 6-1, won 4 straight sets since, coming back and winning, and they ended up beating Giron 7-6, 6-3. So for this matchup, I picked Paul to win the event. So I am a bit biased because I think that Paul is the better player. Now, Felix, we know, has been solid so far here, but we know that his, I'd say, mental toughness can be in doubt at times, and we do know that his shot selection can be questionable at times. Felix does have the better serve, which I am aware of. I think Paul is easily the better returner. And Paul's not a bad server for a guy his size, especially. Can volley, can show some variety. I think for this matchup, I am going to go with Paul. I think Felix has been good. Struggled, though, against Giron at times in the last match, and I think that Paul is a much better version of Giron. Similar type of player in terms of style, but I do think that Paul's better. I think Paul right now is the better player as far as I'm concerned based on consistency. And Felix, after looking, I'd say, questionable at various points in each of the first 2 matches here, I think he's going to run into some problems here against Paul. I think Paul will extract some unforced errors from Felix en route to a win here. Maybe it goes 3, might be competitive, but I don't mind the price here at around minus 135. I think it might be close, though, but I think Paul eventually ekes out a win here en route to a berth in the final. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Korda against Kecmanovic. For this one, Korda is a favorite, minus 115. You have Kecmanovic at minus 105. For the spread here, you have minus half a game for Korda. You have plus half a game for Kecmanovic. For the over-under, you have 23 flat. For set spread, you have Kecmanovic in straight sets at plus 240. For the other set spread, you have Korda to win straight sets at plus 210. For the over 2.5 sets, you have plus 125. One head-to-head history meeting, and you're looking at the matchup in 2022. Faced off in Miami, and Kecmanovic did win that one in straight sets. So it is dated, but Kecmanovic did win the only head-to-head meeting in their careers, and that was on hard court. So we'll get the actual path here. Kecmanovic has been rolling. He's won all 6 sets. He's at the play, beat Bublik, beat O'Connell, and beat Bonzi. So he has been coasting. Only 1 tiebreak, only 1 set with more than 10 games in it. So a lot of these sets have been very lopsided in favor of Kecmanovic. For Korda, he has really gotten an A on the group project without having to do anything, because he had a bye in the first round, then ended up beating Fekina in straight sets, then had a walkover in the quarters because Kokkinakis quit. So Korda, after having elbow surgery, has kind of taken a nap, and he's made it into the semis. So I can't really, I'd say, grade Korda's performance. He looked good against Fekina, but he's barely played because he was able to get by without having to actually step on the court in 2 of the 3 rounds he's had to participate in, or at least he's had to go through on the bracket, because he had a bye, and then he had a walkover in the quarters. So the point is, you could argue, is actually a good thing for Korda, because for a guy off of a serious injury, which he had surgery on, maybe less tennis is more. And you could argue that his durability and his fitness should be better, because he hasn't really had to test himself. On the other end, you could argue that you actually want the reps, because Korda hasn't played much for the last couple of months, and now he's coming in cold after playing 2 sets of tennis in the first 3 rounds, and maybe that's why people think that Kecmanovic might be live for this matchup. Now, for the pricing, I understand why Korda's favored. He's ranked a lot higher. He won a 500 title last year. I get it. I think I'm going to go Kecmanovic, though, for the actual value. I think Korda, once again, might come in cold. Yes, you could argue that for a guy off of an injury, you want the easiest path possible. Maybe, but I do think you kind of want to test yourself to see how good the elbow's feeling, or if you're going to run into problems later on in the match. If this turns into a marathon, you could argue that Kecmanovic has the advantage because, of course, he's fully healthy, and Korda, maybe the elbow starts acting up on him if it gets into a potential deep match. So that could be an issue. But I think that Kecmanovic has been in good form. He's won all 6 sets here. He's been good. He won the head-to-head meeting in straight sets as well on hard court, even though it is dated a couple years. Point is, I think Korda, I understand why he's favored based on his reputation and based on ranking. But the issue is he really hasn't played much. Korda, to get into the actual specifics, he played in the U.S. Open, and he lost to Makic in straight sets. He did not play after that for the entire 2024 season. So once again, he had not played for basically 4+ months. Then he played 1 match against Fekina, and now he's in a semi. It's really tough to put, I'd say, faith in a guy who's barely played any tennis for 4 months. That's a problem. So for that reason, I'm going to go Kekmanovic, who I know is streaky. He can be a head case, but he's played very well here, and I do think that he can keep it rolling into this matchup. For value, I'll go with Kekmanovic at around minus 105. I think it's going to be a toss-up match. Maybe if you want to go for the over 2.5 sets, maybe if you want to go for the team total, you can get over 12.5 team total for either guy at a pretty cheap number. Don't hate that either. I don't mind Kekmanovic there, a team total over 12.5 at minus 115. But I think they're looking at a pretty interesting matchup where the wrong guy might be favored. I think it's a coin toss, like the odds suggest, but I'll go with Kekmanovic, who I think is in better form physically to get the job done in this one at a good price. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the preview of the semifinal matchups in Auckland and in Adelaide. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For that, though, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Adelaide Fantasy because they have a lot of great items in the pick menu. They have, once again, a lot of great profit boosts and give me pick'ems to help make winning easier for you. And once again, a lot of great, I'd say, side projects they got going on because they have the playoff best ball, which is now open, which is the Gauntlet tournament. They have the $2 million in prize up for grabs just for $25 the NFL playoffs. So once again, if you do want to try out best ball, try it out. $2 million in prizes, only $25 risked. What's the worst that could happen? Reminder, though, of the NFL, college football, college basketball, MMA, NBA, NASCAR, and more. You can also use specials and boosts and reflex entries for the upcoming slate. I think I'll go with Russell Wilson, higher half a pick here, who's been really bad lately. And I know the Ravens did have a pick 6 against them a couple weeks ago. I don't mind Russell Wilson potentially struggling in this game, especially based on what the line is located at. It is in Baltimore. Baltimore's expected to win by multiple possessions. That could result in a pretty positive game script where Pittsburgh might have to once again go out of their way to throw a bit more. Don't mind that. So once again, give me Wilson higher, half a pick in that game taking place this weekend in Super Wildcard Weekend. Reminder, though, when you do sign up for your new account, use the promo code SGPN, especially first time deposit offer to 1K bonus cash. So once again, a pretty great deal there when you use the promo code SGPN. Reminder, though, Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished previewing the semifinal matchups in Auckland and Adelaide. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. Swept back-to-back episodes. Hopefully we'll keep rolling here for the third straight sweep on the show. For the lock, I'm going to go to a niche prop. It's going to be on Bet Rivers. I'm going to go back to the Bosavaretti and Monfils match, and I am going to go with the under half a tie break at minus 136 on Bet Rivers. Now the same bet is at minus 185. On DraftKings, so you're saving about 50 cents by shopping around, which I'll do every time. Now, I'll mention Bosavaretti has really not been involved in many breakers lately, as 6 of the last 7 matches have not featured a breaker, including each of the first 3 matches in this event. A lot of breaks, and I see that being the case here in this one, too. 3 Monfils of the last 5 matches, though, did not feature a tiebreak as well. So, once again, you've seen no tiebreaks being more common than tiebreaks, which I think is definitely going to bode well for the script in this matchup. They are both decent servers, not amazing. Should be a decent amount of breakpoint chances. We just saw in the last meeting there were a bunch of breaks too. See that happening. So if you get a breaker, it's probably going to involve at least one break by each guy in a set. And if that happens, that's kind of unlucky. But I don't see both guys holding 6 times in a row. Don't see that happening. So once again, I see a pretty solid script for no breaks in this one. You're looking at the recent meeting, though. On December 31st, match went to 3 sets, no tie breaks. So once again, that does bode well for the script here. But minus 136 for 2 guys that are not really great servers that once again have not had many tie breaks in the event, I think is a good deal. And once again, the same bets a minus 185 shopping around. Like 136 quite a bit. I'll take it as my lock for the show. For the dog, I am going to go to the other match between Paul and Felix, and I am going to go with Paul to win the first set and the matchup plus 120. Paul, though, is a minus 140 favorite in some books, so you are finding a way to reduce juice. You're saving 60 cents if he ends up getting the job done in the first set as well. Now, Paul's been a very good starter over the last couple of months, as he's won the first set in 7 of the last 9 matches, so I do think that Paul can get off to a good start here. Felix has not been a great first set player, as he did drop the first set in 3 of his last 5, dating back to last year. So I think Paul, if he wins the first set, is going to catch the first, I'd say, leg of this dog play. Second of all, be in a good spot to win it. So I do think, once again, it's a good way of getting reduced juice. If Paul ends up losing the first set, he probably loses anyway. So I do like, once again, a way of getting a similar outcome, or basically hoping on the same outcome, which is Paul winning, but getting a better price in the process. And I do think with him winning the first set in 7 of 9 matches, it's a pretty decent outcome, or realistic outcome, for Paul to get off to a good start. Maybe Felix struggles, and I think you're looking at Paul, who can get a set lead and win from there. But give me plus 120 as my dog for, once again, the play on the show. So once again, the actual plays for the show. The lock's going to be in Bosavaretti and Monfils under. Half a tie break at minus 136. For the dog, I am going to go with Paul to win the first set and the match at plus 120. That's going to wrap it up. We're back once again for the final here in Adelaide and Auckland. Do see something in the comments section. How's it going, Ryan? Thanks for stopping by. Yep, I do think Ryan, if Bosavaretti pulls off the upset against Joker, that would definitely be absolute chaos. I don't know if I'll name my son after him, but point is that'll definitely be a very fun matchup there for the first round. And also a point from AU. A nice to see you. Hopefully you're having a good day so far. Either way, though, a reminder, next episode, we have the final. So we have 2 matchups there we're going to preview. Then we have the outright episodes in both the Women's Australian Open and the Men's Australian Open. We're going to get into over the next few days. A lot of content. Hopefully you do enjoy it. Till next time, though, you know where to find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show as well. A reminder, by the way, we actually do have some breaking news for the MLB show, which I'll mention probably on the MLB show at some point. We're going to have a bonus show. We're going to be having a Propcast MLB edition a couple of times per week. So I'll be on that as well. A couple more episodes for baseball content. I know that that's a couple months down the road, but just getting that out of the, I'd say getting that out into the open now. There will be more baseball episodes featuring props. So once again, there are a couple more episodes featuring me for baseball content. Till next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.